Guys, Charles Wall here. Let's see if we can do another one of these FRQs today. 2006B micro FRQ number 2. This is a little consumer and producer surplus, and there's going to be a price ceiling, and then demand decreases. All right, read it. There's a market for home security systems is perfectly competitive, currently in equilibrium. Using a correctly labeled graph of supply and demand, show that market. All right, make sure you put your P's and Q's there. Don't let them take a point for that. We need to show the equilibrium price, the equilibrium quantity, P star, Q star. Easy enough, right? Straight across, there's my P star. Here's my Q star. Show the area representing consumer surplus, and the area representing producer surplus is PS. So QS, PS. Easy enough. Done. B. Suppose the government imposes an effective or binding price ceiling. Redraw your graph in part A and label the ceiling price as P2. Complete shading the area representing the sum of the consumer surplus and producer surplus after the imposition of the price ceiling. All right, so let's do it here. We've got supply, we've got demand, P's and Q's. Now understand there's a little mantra we always use. Floors are high and ceilings are low. We need to know that our price ceilings have to be below the equilibrium to be binding or effective. We're going to label that P2, I think. All right. We also know that when we have a low price ceiling, we know we now have a new tick, tick, tick. We come straight across where we hit that supply curve. This is our new quantity supplied. At this low price, suppliers are unwilling to supply as much of it as they were before. At the P2 level, also, we know at this low price, people want a lot of it. Right? So the quantity demanded has increased. We see quantity demand is greater than quantity supply. We can definitely know that there is a shortage in this market right now. That's not necessary for answering this question. I just always like to throw some extra stuff in there. Obviously, the only amount this society gets of this good, though, is what's produced. They like to ask this question quite a bit. How much is consumed by society at this P2 price? And obviously, it doesn't matter how much you want it, the quantity demand. What matters is what's produced. That's what you get. We can go straight up here and recognize that this is our deadweight loss. We've lost, and it's good to talk about what the College Board likes deadweight loss to be sort of defined as a loss of consumer surplus and producer surplus. Look up here originally. We had this large triangle of consumer surplus, excuse me, and this large triangle of producer surplus. Now when the price goes down, consumers only produce so much, right? And we have this area of deadweight loss. And I'm just going to draw it in up here. Let's say it looks like that. Can we see that with this deadweight loss or this loss of quantity, right, that we've lost this amount of consumer, this amount of producer surplus? We could see that we've lost this amount of consumer and this amount of producer surplus because of the price ceiling. This is an excellent definition to be able to use on the College Board. I'm going to back this up a little bit, get rid of soaps. There we go. I think we're good. All right, we've got our price ceiling. We do need to show the new area of consumer surplus. Remember, consumer surplus is everything above the price, but below the demand curve. So we can see that all of this area is consumer surplus. As that price goes down, consumer surplus would obviously increase. Right? It's gotten bigger. Even though we know we've lost some because of the deadweight loss and the reduction of quantity that society is having to deal with because of the price ceiling, we still know that we can see that consumer surplus is everything above the price but below the demand curve. Obviously, we don't include deadweight loss in that. Producer surplus is everything above the supply curve but below the price. So it's all of this triangle down here is our producer surplus. I think we're good. Let's go to C. Suppose the demand for home security systems decreases, the demand decreases, and the price ceilings remain binding. So to remain binding, again, excuse me, to remain binding, it has to be below. The ceiling has to remain below equilibrium. So indicate what will happen to each of the followings: consumer surplus and producer surplus. Now, understand that our demand curve here is going to decrease. Right? So as that demand decreases, I just want to do it in a different color to be fancy. As that demand is decreasing, can we still see that our price ceiling is below that equilibrium? So it's still binding. But as that demand decreases, can we see that consumer surplus is getting smaller and smaller? Here we've got our demand decreases even more. Is the price ceiling still binding? It's still below the equilibrium, so it's still binding, right? As that demand curve keeps shifting to the left in a decrease, we can see that we've lost this consumer surplus, right? We understand here that our consumer surplus is getting smaller, but can we look and see that our producer surplus is not touched? As long as that demand curve is higher than equilibrium, and it has to be to have a binding price ceiling, then producer surplus won't change. So we keep getting smaller and smaller amounts of consumer surplus, but producer surplus is not affected. So we would just say consumer surplus decreases, producer surplus is no change. All right, thanks guys. Be safe.